Hi, and welcome to the latest Tech Trends podcast, brought to you by vanillaplus.com, the evolving enterprise and IoT now. I'm Jeremy Cowan, and I want to thank you for joining us for today's sometimes serious, sometimes light-hearted look at digital transformation for enterprises. Now, our two guests are from diverse backgrounds, but the three of us kind of share an interest in one thing, and that's tech events. One is an organizer, one is a keynote speaker, and I'm a sometimes moderator. As we know, some event brands have really suffered in 2020, but not all of them, as our first guest proves. I can't think of anyone better to start this discussion than Giles Cummings, founder and CEO of the successful FutureNet World series of events. These telecom conferences are now, I think, in their third year. Giles will correct me if that's wrong, and still growing fast. So today I want to look for positives, finding out what lessons can be learned from the horrors of 2020/21 in the tech sector, and ask what tech events will actually look like in the future. So, Giles, thanks for joining the podcast.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
And now for his sins, our next guest attends even more tech events than I do. In fact, every time I poke my nose into a conference hall, it seems I find he's already up there speaking, which means I should probably try to get there on time. He is Matt Hatton, who speaks as co-founder of the analyst firm Transformer Insights, which specializes in IoT and digital transformation for enterprises. A warm welcome back to the pod, Matt.
Thank you, Jeremy. Nice to be here again.
It's good to have you both here. Okay, we're going to share some key technology news that each of us has seen lately. And then we'll be kicking around our thoughts on the future of live and virtual tech events worldwide, before finally, in What the Tech, we'll chew over some of the stories that made us stop and look again recently. Giles first. What news have you noticed, Giles?
Yeah, well, I mean, my story, not surprisingly, is related to events and perhaps our discussion today about the future events. So this is a story that followed Ericsson's announcement to pull out of Mobile World Congress at the beginning of last week. So it was late last Monday that they announced their withdrawal, citing continued health and safety concerns amid the ongoing pandemic. Now, remember that Ericsson were the first major exhibitor to withdraw from the event last February, and it was like a pack of cards, as the others very quickly followed suit and led to the unfortunate cancellation of the event. This time's a little different. Right after Ericsson's announcement, Telco DR CEO Daniela Royston posted something on LinkedIn saying she would be happy to take over Ericsson's stand space in Hall 2. Now, she didn't have to wait too long for an answer from GSMA, who responded on LinkedIn saying immediately, yeah, let's do it. And Daniela Royston, as you may know, she's the former CEO of Optiva. Now, she's got this idea that she's going to fill a booth normally given over to base station equipment, largely, with an entourage of public cloud specialists, which is very interesting because many of the companies that Royston champions are a challenge to the traditional model favored by Ericsson, Huawei, Nokia, and co, who are ordinarily the biggest sponsors of the event and GSMA's major paymaster. However, the GSMA have jumped onto this PR opportunity, and on the 12th of March, which was only 4 days after Ericsson's withdrawal, issued an official press release announcing Telco DR as a brand new exhibitor, taking over 6,000 square meters of space with a title, MWC is going public cloud. So is this the get out of jail card for GSMA, I wonder? Is this going to pivot Mobile World Congress, make it more about a public cloud, allowing the disruptors into the exhibition space that's always been the domain of the traditional equipment vendors? It remains to be seen. So that was an interesting, I thought, piece of news that grabbed my attention this week, Jeremy.
Yeah. Oh, my first thought, Giles, I'm ashamed to admit it, was that I'm certainly going to miss Ericsson's catering. More importantly, I guess this means, as you say, Ericsson won't be on hand to defend the traditional private cloud model. And in the longer run, you've got to wonder whether or not this will damage relations between the GSMA and the incumbent network equipment providers. Matt, what's your take on that?
I think, much as you, my immediate thought is there's a lot of analysts and journalists who get at least 2 meals a day at the Ericsson booth, and hoping that the new arrivals will be equally generous with their catering. But I think one of the interesting things for me is that there's always been a nudge towards Mobile World Congress becoming more of a general technology show rather than being so tightly focused on mobile, to the point where, maybe you'd think about calling it Telecoms World Congress or something along those lines. And maybe this is a slight encouragement to move in that direction. Maybe it changes the direction of the show a little bit. I think it's quite easy to read a lot in, as we've generally done in 2020, read a lot into what happens in one year being extrapolated out to what happens in future years. It's this idea of digital transformation, 2 years or 10 years or whatever years worth of digital transformation happening in 2 months or 10 months or whatever. But it's only a digital transformation if it sticks. And it's the same with this. Do we think Ericsson will be back in 2022? You can bet they will be. And will they want their traditional place? I'm pretty sure they will, and I'm pretty sure they'll have their checkbook open. So I think it's a little easy to read too much into it.
Yeah. I think money will definitely talk on that in 2022.
No, I think so. I mean, in terms of catering and perhaps entertainment, you might get a better experience with Daniela because, I mean, she's no mug to PR, as you probably know. And she's mentioned one idea she's already got, building a tennis court in that hall and getting Nadal along for a hit. So, this sounds like fancy, but it perhaps isn't. She's a pretty formidable tennis player,
so I understand.
Is ranked in the top 30, I believe, in the over 45s in the world of tennis. So it's not wholly unrealistic.
Yeah, and she's very smart on the PR front, as you rightly point out. Matt, which tech story caught your eye recently?
This is something that I saw on a website called smart-energy.com, but you'll probably find it elsewhere. It relates to Microsoft and a partnership with Total, the French oil, petrol, various petrochemicals type company. And being a typical analyst, what I'm looking at is not specifically the story itself, but more the trend that it indicates. And it's what it's doing is demonstrating a real change for Microsoft and how far Microsoft has come as an organization. So the interesting thing, being a Microsoft watcher, is noting how they've extended the product offering, developed it so that it almost looks like an out-of-the-box digital transformation for a lot of the vertical sectors that they address with the products that they call industry clouds. And that seems to be increasingly important as an end-to-end product suite for them, almost to the point where we're not quite there yet, but you're getting towards the point of maybe not needing, or certainly not needing as much of a input from systems integrators. There's a sort of DIY digital transformation feel to it. I mean, it's not DIY, obviously, because there's a lot of hard work and thought gone into a set of products that are there, but it's very much an off-the-shelf digital transformation, which I think is pretty interesting. Now, Total being a huge organization, I imagine in their case, there's going to be quite a lot of customization involved. But if you're say a bank with 10 or 12 branches in the US Midwest, you can buy a financial services package from Microsoft, and that will provide you with just about everything you need. Now, to a certain extent, it's just a skim on Teams and a skim on a bunch of other products, some of the robotic process automation capabilities that Microsoft's got, and so on. But it certainly does the job. So that's what caught my eye.
Yeah. So in short, Redmond will be buying greener electricity, and I guess we'll just have to see how Microsoft's cloud and particularly AI solutions will help Total cut its greenhouse emissions.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Matt. The tech story I want to raise isn't one story at all, really. I guess it's more of a trend. I think we're all used to the idea that totalitarian regimes like China's restrict access to their markets for big tech companies from overseas like Google and Amazon. I mean, Google fell victim to the Great Firewall of China, as it's become known, and its market share of searches in China dropped from, I think it was 2009, there was a high of over 35% down to 4%, less than 4% last year. Now it seems the BBC is reporting that even China's homegrown tech giants are under increasing pressure from Beijing's regulators, who are concerned at their tech giants' growing influence. Apparently, China's State Administration for Market Regulation has already fined 12 Chinese companies, including Tencent, Baidu, and Didi Chuxing, for deals that violated its anti-monopoly rules. A little aside here, I mean, there's no prizes for spotting the irony in a one-party state being anti-monopoly, but that's not really my point. What you may not have noticed are the reports last month on the likes of CTV News that India is also rolling out new regulations for social media and digital streaming sites to make them more accountable for the online content on their platforms, and giving the Indian government powers to police it. And meanwhile, I'm sure it didn't escape your notice, the Australian government has taken aim at Facebook, although more for not paying for the news it shares. I mean, Facebook pushed back by unlisting various Australian news and information services, and then quickly backed down and agreed a deal for news with Murdoch. I guess that no matter where it calls home, big tech these days is coming under pressure, and that's in Australia, UK, Europe, and the US, to pay more tax and to be more accountable. So there's no tax protection from the Biden administration, unlike the last one. Editorial and commercial freedom is being reined back in Asia. So my question to you is it time to call this peak tech? Is this the high watermark for the tech giants? Matt, what do you think of that?
Well, there's another one that you didn't mention, actually. Jack Ma at Alibaba. Alibaba was another one of those big tech companies, but wasn't in your list. But the guy disappeared for quite a while. I'm not even sure if he's back yet.
Last I heard, he's not.
No. So very strange scenario there. The interesting one to watch for me is India, and I did a bit of work on this last year. Tremendous amount of interest from tech companies in terms of getting into India. So we've seen Facebook investments in Google and Microsoft and so on, all AWS as well, wanting to make investments in the technology sector to get part of what is a substantially growing economy. Thing is, you always see when new technology spaces emerge, it takes a while for the regulatory authorities to catch up. So thinking just in terms of the basic question of regulation or political input on what are some very significant influences of public behavior, public perception, it takes a while for that to kick in. And I think that's certainly the case here. And it was, I guess, to be expected to a certain extent. There's always going to be a bit of friction which gets ignored for the first few years of a new set of technology's life, and then after a while it starts getting regulated. That's my take.
Yeah. Giles, the thing I wanted to ask you then is, I mean, you're the one here with most experience of putting on live events. Let's pivot to talk about these, because this is it's been both a horrendous year, but also a year of some opportunity for those who are fleet of foot. Do you think the pandemic has changed the way that technology events scene is seen forever? Is it going to look any different now as we go forward?
It's a good question. I mean, obviously at the moment it looks very different, and the pandemic, as you say, has turned the events industry upside down, and it forces us all to think about how we serve our customers and communities in a different way. So, I mean, if you turn the clock back 18 months, no one would have believed that we'd been living through what we have been living through for the past 12 months. And certainly no one could have predicted the impact of the pandemic would have on the events industry, amongst others. I mean, it's been decimated with businesses going under, and I mean, long-standing annual events being cancelled. In other cases, companies have been forced into reducing the number of events and obviously pivoting their business to a digital model. And the landscape does look very different today. You know, whether that is something that is going to be the landscape forever is another question. I mean, my own view is, you know, we've all had to learn very quickly, and I mean everyone in terms of pivoting to digital. So, you know, we've in most cases turned what were in-person events into virtual events in quick time and a quick turnaround, and everyone has had to learn an enormous amount, from the organisers like ourselves, the sponsors, the exhibitors, the delegates, the speakers, the media, and so on. And what is very clear is that virtual events are a completely different experience to in-person events. In my opinion, we can never hope to replicate the networking value of in-person events. So certainly in our case, we're able to deliver great content via some pretty cool platforms and achieve really good engagement with that content.
Yeah.
And you can create highly targeted and effective networking opportunities via roundtable discussions, for example. But you can never recreate either the spontaneity of meeting somebody in the coffee break or the value of an exhibition, for example, via a virtual platform. And a lot of events obviously carry pretty sizable exhibitions alongside the conference, and that's a big challenge. And you know, if you speak to most people in our industry, and if they're honest, the virtual exhibition simply doesn't work. And the technology is there. You know, I don't want to get into my views on the enormous amounts of virtual platforms that have suddenly emerged over the last 12 months, largely created by people who aren't events people, but that's another story. But the tech is there and can offer the functionality to network and visit stands and engage with product teams on stands. But honestly, the willingness is simply not there. So if the willingness is not there, it doesn't work. And I suppose in answer to your question, will the pandemic change events forever? My belief is there's a huge pent-up demand for in-person events, and as soon as it is safe to travel and attend live in-person events, they'll bounce back very quickly.
Matt, what's your thought on this? Do you think people will go back to traveling globally for events, or will they be more selective if they do so?
I think Giles' latter point was perhaps the most critical one in the short term, at least. You know, will people who have been locked indoors for 12 months want to go out and see actual people when they get the chance? I think they probably will. So, in fact, the expression I would probably pick is desperate. But there's a few other dynamics. I mean, I think about why I go to conferences. There's two reasons why I go to conferences. One is to get up on the stage, make people think that I'm a smart guy who knows what he's talking about, hopefully, right? And from that stems the work that we do. That's one element of it. The other element is kind of about being present, okay? It demonstrates that we're part of the ecosystem, part of the markets that we work in, these IoT and AI and digital transformation spaces. So it gives people the confidence that you're there and you're part of the ecosystem. And I think that's the same for vendors as well. Like, to a certain extent, they want to be in project mode, but also they just want to be demonstrating that they're there and they're part of the ecosystem. Now, you can do that with virtual events to an extent. And, I made ample use of virtual events and been involved in quite a lot of them. But it's a bit difficult to demonstrate presence and demonstrate that you're a relevant player in the space. And so I think people will go back to in-person events. I really think there's still a tremendous demand for it. Purse strings might be a little tighter, though, as a result of what looks like a global recession, although the tech sector seems to be pretty healthy. So we'll see how that goes.
It's certainly doing okay. I mean, echoing Giles's point about spontaneity, I think the one thing that I found it very hard to replicate through digital events from benefiting in live events is that sort of serendipitous moment when you bump into somebody who you've never heard of before, you've never met before, and it turns out that they are possibly very relevant to what you do, and the two of you can talk about doing something completely new, completely fresh, that you hadn't even contemplated when you walked in that day. And I love those moments, and it never ceases to amaze me how often they happen.
I completely agree. Everybody talks about the water cooler moments or the over a cup of coffee kind of moments. It's those kind of conversations that you can have. There's no reason why you can't spot interesting companies at the virtual events. That's the only thing. But it's hard to know where to go looking. And I think I probably still haven't been to as many virtual events in the last 12 months as I would have been to proper in-person events, just because I miss the other aspects of it. So you kind of put yourself into the room and you commit to spending 2 days sitting and finding out what's going on. You don't sort of drift in and out of it as you would do with virtual events. I tend to find myself a lot more focused, which I think is a useful thing.
Yeah.
Giles, you mentioned Mobile World Congress, and they just held their first post-pandemic, if it's not too early to say so, event in China last month. Do you know if this has taught us as an industry any useful lessons that we can take forward?
I'm not sure it has. I mean, it attracted 20,000 visitors over the 3 days, which is a third of the number that attended in 2019. I mean, the organisers put in obviously very stringent and good measures to ensure the health and safety of attendees, and processes to ensure regular testing before admittance, social distancing measures, capacity restrictions, flow measures, etc., which are all very necessary. But I think we know that. I mean, I don't think there's anything there that we don't know as organisers. I expect the show was largely domestic. I'm not sure how many international visitors they attracted. The bigger question for me is around the international events, going back to your point about whether people are going to be more selective or not, and the willingness of companies to send staff, and the willingness of individuals to travel and attend events. And I certainly don't think we're there yet.
No. There was some very encouraging research just a week or two ago from CC Group, a UK-based PR and communications company, who put out some research into the type of content people value when trying to learn more about tech vendors. And I noticed in that, I mean, not only, I'm pleased to say, did magazines and websites come out very high, as I'm happy to say did analysts, Matt, but events and conferences came in the top 5 out of 14 categories, with 33%, I think it was, of people saying events are a key source. So that was from research done at the end of last year, beginning of this year, and clearly the demand is not going away. As you said earlier, Matt, it is pent-up demand, and people will be queuing to come again, but I'm not sure that we're there yet.
No, I agree that we're not there yet. It's a good point, though. I mean, what's interesting, and certainly what we've learned, and we've learned a lot in the last 12 months running virtual events against what was our typical model, which was the in-person event. And sponsors, for example, the vendors, in many cases, they really had no understanding of what to expect from a virtual event. This was all very new to them. So expectations around KPIs and measures and whether their activities are of value or not. All their traditional metrics went out the window. And really what I think a lot of the vendors now look for in terms of outcomes from participation in the virtual events is very much focused around the thought leadership and the messaging, and less in terms of the networking, because as I said earlier, really the networking value is not nearly as high as it is in an in-person event. So there's lots of things at play. There are different models, different obviously types of events. But I think, the one thing that certainly we need to go back to in terms of where the events are going in the future is really down to the individuals and the companies and their willingness to travel. And that will dictate really what the events will look like going forward.
Yeah. Thank you, gents. Well, we're into time added on by the fourth official. He's standing on the touchline, waving a board that says 5 minutes. We've reached the final section of the pod called What the Tech, where we share something tech-based that either amused or just amazed us. Go on, Matt, what struck you?
Every few years, Jeremy, we seem to see a three-letter acronym, a TLA, I should say, which causes some palpitations amongst experts of some sort, be it economists or art historians in this case. So I'm thinking of BTC, Bitcoin, ICO, initial coin offerings. That was quite a big thing about 3 or 4 years ago, but you don't really seem to hear much about initial coin offerings anymore. That caused some concern for economists. The new one is NFTs, non-fungible tokens, to do with the ownership of digital assets. So things like Jack Dorsey sold off his first tweet, and lots of other people have been selling off tweets. No one seems interested in my acerbic commentary on the IoT market up until now, but maybe I just don't know where I'm supposed to be putting them on sale. Anyhow, the really eye-catching one for me was an artist called Beeple, who sold an entire digital artwork called Every Day's the First 5,000 Days for $69 million, which seems crazy. But then you compare it to the Mona Lisa, which I'm sure is worth an awful lot more than $69 million. And you think, I could have a copy of the Mona Lisa on my wall. It won't be the original Mona Lisa. And maybe the same thing applies to digital content. I could have a copy of Beeple's work on my screen. It wouldn't be the original one. I mean, it's not perceptibly different from the original, but maybe the art isn't perceptibly different. It's just the person who owns the real one knows they own the real one. Gave me something to think about this week.
Matt, you're going to have to call me a show-off, but if I can't hang my artwork on a wall in Vanilla Plus Towers, it's just one more reason, that is apart from the glaringly obvious, why I won't be investing 69 million of my hard-earned dollars in a digital picture. I mean, not even 5,000 of them. I don't care if it's fungible or non-fungible.
Surely not just hanging on the wall. I mean, you've got a couple of those sharks cut in half by Damien Hirst and that sort of thing, right? You've got some of those knocking around, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's in amongst my art collection. Yeah, of course. But apparently non-fungible tokens, still sounds rude, non-fungible tokens are different from cryptocurrencies, and they can't be traded and they can't be exchanged for an equivalent value. So I still struggle with this.
Yeah, well, it's it might be like tulips in Amsterdam in the 17th century. We shall see.
It's a South Sea bubble. So you think it might just be their novelty value that makes them valuable? Do you think that the fact that the new owner doesn't hold the copyright and can't collect royalties will hold it back?
Yeah, absolutely. And it could just be that, if you'd gone back 1,000 years and told somebody that, a piece of canvas with some paint on it was going to be worth millions and millions of dollars, they would have looked at you in disbelief and wondered why you weren't spending your money on a castle or some land. So the concept of what's valuable obviously evolves over time. You could apply the same thing to gold, not inherently valuable, or currency, in fact, fiat currencies. Yeah. So these things are only valuable because we all agree that they're valuable. So if it may be a generational element to it, and maybe the 20-somethings of today are thinking, yeah, that seems reasonable. That's, well, maybe not at $69 million, it doesn't seem reasonable, but it seems reasonable that something digital has some inherent value as an original piece. Interesting.
I know what she who must be a babe would have to say if I turned having spent $69 million on this, but that's another story. Giles, what's caught your eye?
A bit of news that caught my eye this week is a piece about a study carried out by researchers from the Universities of Michigan, Maryland, and Peking, and they're exploring ways in which employers could predict the work-related behavioural patterns of remote workers and assess the risk that they will resign. And the research focused on developers using GitHub, which is a coding hosting platform that you may know of, but it's for collaboration and allows you to work with others together on projects remotely. And this study involved the analysis of 63 million GitHub posts from approximately 10 million different developers, analyzing the use of emojis. Yes, emojis, and their correlation to work-related behavior patterns, such as levels of activity, types of work they do, communication styles, etc., etc. And they're now looking into the causality between emoji use and work-related outcomes. And specifically, if emojis can be used as an instrument to improve performance and retention of workers. So who would have thought that, emojis? And I think really a takeaway from this is that we're all going to have to think very carefully and be more mindful about how we and when we use emojis going forward in the workplace.
Yeah. When we're all working remotely, it's not such a daft tool for HR departments, but it's no help at all for those who prefer not to use emojis at all. And I did notice that only, I think the maximum figure in the GitHub survey was 14% of GitHub posts in the study contained emojis. So employers, they're going to need a bit more help than that.
Yeah, agree.
So we use GitHub with our developer. I don't think either I or he or anybody else in our organization has ever used an emoji in any context in there, but maybe we're unusual, seemingly so.
It'd be no good for you then, Matt. Yeah. You're safe.
Yeah. Well, there's just time to tell you about the £15 million, that's about $21 million competition that was launched this week in the UK to reduce aviation emissions. Clearly a worthwhile goal for sure, but can a winner for what they're calling green fuels, green skies be found just by converting domestic waste into eco-sustainable aviation fuel? That remains to be seen. I guess this is just biodigester 2.0. It's a nice idea. I'm not sure if it can be economically viable, but I'd be delighted to be proved wrong. Apparently, we'll be turning household rubbish, waste wood, flue gases, and, quote, excess electricity, unquote, into green aviation fuel. How much better if we can use it to improve the airline's dreadful carbon footprint that we all contribute to when we can fly. So I'm in favour of the principle. I'm just a little bit sceptical about the path towards it. You can watch out for news of what our politicians, certainly over here in the UK, are already calling jet zero. Do you see what they did there? Matt, did you spot this?
I didn't see it, but it's good news. I wonder what counts as, what was it, excess electricity or...
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I guess it's those sources of electricity that can't be controlled because they're more flexible through wind and wave and sunlight. But I'm trying to work it out myself. Anyway, finally, if any of you have seen something amusing or amazing in the news that you want us to share next time, do let us know and we'll give you a shout out. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at JCIOT now. Time's up, everyone. Let me finish by saying a big thank you for sharing your expertise with us. First, to Giles Cummings of FutureNet World. Giles, where can listeners find out more about your event?
Well, our website is probably the best place to look. So that's futurenetworld.net. And we've got our big flagship event coming up in April. So that's something to look out for.
Well, I can recommend it. I attended the last one and was lucky enough to moderate a session, and it was really fascinating. And thank you to Matt Hatton of Transformer Insights. Matt, thank you.
My pleasure, Jeremy.
Where can people reach you, Matt?
Transformerinsights.com, transformer with an A, that is.
Great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can't let you go without thanking you too for joining us around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the pod wherever you found us. And if you can spare a moment, give the pod a 5-star rating and do say something nice about it. It really does make a difference to our ranking. Anyway, keep safe and keep checking the ee.ai, iot-now.com and vanillaplus.com for tech news and features. And join us again soon for another Tech Trends podcast looking at enterprise digital transformation. Bye for now.